After my last Glock 17 prints failed, I brought the parts kits home, took them apart, put them in different frames, and I dry fired, cycled some rounds. And I just wasn't really happy with how the trigger and everything felt. It was kind of gritty, not very smooth. I tried cleaning everything, making sure there was no plastic debris in it, and it didn't really seem to help a lot. So I decided I was going to try the quote 25-cent trigger kit where you polish the internals. I have some of this white polishing compound, which is for stainless and hardened metals. I also have black, which is pretty abrasive. It's for taking deep scratches and stuff out. I didn't want to use that because we don't want to remove material. I also have some brown tripoli, which is more for aluminum, brass, soft metals. I decided to go with white as most of these internals are hardened. The reason I chose this on these parts kits were because they're just a bunch of random ass parts thrown together. Some of these parts were used, some were, like I think this is a lone wolf part. We've got a ghost connector. The upper parts kit was literally the cheapest parts I could find on eBay. And I don't remember what they were, but it was cheap. And I noticed with this upper, I had problems getting rounds to chamber, getting rounds to eject. So I started looking everything over, and I noticed that on my safety here, let's see if I can get it to stay focused. You can see I filed this down. There was a massive lip all the way around that, and I'm guessing when it was machined they forgot to knock it off. So I used a diamond file and just went over it as lightly as I could until there was no more lip there. You'll also notice from the few rounds I did get to cycle, whatever kind of coating they put on this already has some wear marks in it, and they're not exactly even. So that tells me that either these parts are not made correctly or the coating is not applied evenly. This one has a weird, the only spot that's worn is up here on the corner. Little tiny bit down here on the face. But that actually catches on my fingernail. We're just going to try to polish it and see if that helps. I did buy the slide used, but the upper parts kit was just cheap as shit. So we're going to blame poor quality control on that. I have polished one other parts kit, and it turned out alright. So some people say not to use power tools. I say to hell with all that handwork. This is a 3000 grit polishing wheel, and you can definitely tell a difference when you add a little bit of compound. So places you want to be careful of, go easy on the compound up here. And even this one is not looking great. You can see that there is a little bit of a burr on there where it was stamped out. And that one definitely catches on the nail. Problem is, we don't want to remove too much material or it won't function anymore. And the disclaimer is always, do this at your own risk. If you mess up, the parts are trash, it's your own fault, nobody told you to do it. But if you don't practice, you're never going to get good at it. And let's face it, most of us are either poor or tight asses, and we don't want to pay a shop to do the work for us when we can try to mess it up ourselves. So that little bit of action took that burr off for the most part. Alright, that feels a lot better. Check everything else for burrs. So you can see and hear that there is such a burr on there I can catch my nail on it. And if I can catch my nail on it, that means it's going to catch on the other hardened parts inside the gun. That's where your gritty feeling is going to come from. Uneven resistance, uneven trigger pull. And when you buy those nicer trigger kits that have much better quality, that's the difference you're paying for. That's the difference between these $40 lower parts kits and $100+ lower parts kits. There's a burr there, and this piece rubs on plastic. So that burr can actually cause the trigger housing to wear out faster, or cause it to snag, because burrs across plastic will create gouges. This is just one of the cheap Harbor Freight diamond files. I got a whole pack of them for $6 or $7. Really didn't want to file on these parts too much, but I can't leave big burrs. Alright, let's get to the Dremel work. You only need a little bit of compound. So I have this set between 15 and 20,000 RPMs, and we're just going to touch it off. You'll notice real quick that it picks up compound. I don't know how well you can see that. The part that I just hit is now silver and shiny, whereas the rest of it is kind of that burnt bronze color. And that's all it took to get that coating off. We don't want to go around that too much, because that polishing compound is abrasive and it will reduce the diameter of the part. Now, if you have a good quality parts kit, the only surface you would want to get is this surface, because it contacts other metal parts. But like I said, this was a cheap one, and the coating is obviously not wearing evenly inside the gun. I don't know if you can hear that. There's a line all the way around this part too. I'm not going to file on that though, we'll just hit it. through and check to make sure I hit everything. With how easy that coating came off, I'm guessing it was just some kind of surface dye. Or whatever little kid in China they had making these just colored it with Sharpie or something, because man, that coating just came right off. But it polished up nicely, so we'll move on to the next part. The only part we're going to do here is this surface. Alright, we cleaned that up really quick. This is the same coating. I'm just going to go over this plunger because there's a little bit of a line on either side of it, and it's not enough to catch a fingernail on, but it was leaving weird wear marks in the extractor. No more line, nice and smooth. And we don't really need to do this part, but I mean, if it's already, everything's out, might as well. I'm going to assume that this is an actual Glock branded part because it has the 336 part number on it, and it polished up really well. I don't know if I can get it in there, but you'll see how smooth the surface is. Some of the aftermarket stuff, even after polishing it, there will be a lot of surface porosity where it was either cast poorly or stamped out on equipment that hasn't been maintained. But that is a really smooth finish with no porosity, so I'm guessing that's a name brand part. Alright, this is my Ghost connector, and it already has a pretty nice shine on it. But you can see there are some wear marks on it right here, right across the top. And I did have these parts lubed when I put them together, so a little bit of compound will at least take the wear off. got a lot of the finer scratches out of it. There's still a little bit of a line up there. We'll try a little bit more. All right. And we'll go on here. This is the part that rubs up against the connector. This thing is disgusting. Every time I touch it, I find more rough spots on it. I mean, this is just a stamped steel part, and the stamping dies work a lot like a pair of scissors. You know, the metal comes in, it gets stamped and cuts the blank out, and it'll go through a multi-process that stamps the different shapes in it. If the dies are not maintained properly, you get these edges that just roll over. And that was something I had to look for. I used to be a stamping press operator and made a lot of lower control arms and other parts for some of the major automotive companies. But we would actually send our dies to die maintenance and have them serviced whenever we started getting issues like that. And unfortunately, I don't know what brand this was, because like I said, I bought a bunch of used parts and on sale parts. Some Lone Wolf, Ghost, factory Glock, and whatever the hell else was in their parts bin, I guess. The good thing about these diamond files is you can go sideways across things if you don't have enough room. Alright, that got that shitty edge off there. We're going to do the inside. We'll do the bottom where it rubs on the plastic trigger housing, and we'll do the top up here, which you can see has a wear line on it already as well. went ahead and did this whole outside just because it rubs up against this part of the frame. And I did take my diamond file and clean this up and then sand it smooth with some fine grit sandpaper. So this should be a pretty smooth surface between the polished trigger bar and the filed frame. Now we're going to hit this spot up here. Make sure we got all the burrs off of it. Then when we get done, we'll have a polished turd. Now there are some more burrs down here and up here and there, but those aren't going to contact anything, so I'm not going to waste my time filing those and polishing the inside of it. We hit the important parts and some parts that aren't so important. So that's it for the parts. Polishing anyway. Next we'll take this Shooter's Lube solvent. This is my go-to. Doesn't stink, cleans nicely, not terribly expensive. And then we'll get it thrown back together and see how smooth she operates now. One thing I noticed while cleaning is that I had an abnormal burr right there, and it was actually rolled up and over, and I used a very small screwdriver, little flathead, to kind of get in there and pry the lip up enough so that I could file it off. And this is another one of those things that I don't want to file on this part of the firing pin, but at the same time I know that I cannot leave that big giant lip on there. It could break off, get lodged inside the gun, cause the gun to jam, or cause a severe damage, or it could cause parts to hang up on each other. So I got that taken care of. I'm gonna hit that with the wheel and some polish too and try to smooth it out the rest of the way and hope that it still functions. Otherwise I'll spend the money on a better part. Alright, everything's back together, so now we're gonna put a little bit of lubrication in here. I'm going to put some on the top and bottom here, on both sides of the trigger bar and connector, in between the trigger bar and the rails, in between the trigger bar and the frame, and we'll manually move it. As you can see, we get some over travel. I have an adjustable trigger housing in the other one right now. If it works out well, we'll get another one for this. Alright. We'll put a couple drops in their upper. Alright, it's smooth all the way through, resets every time. So I guess I didn't mess anything up. Now we'll have to get back out and try it. This is the other PETG frame I printed, but this one is in Sunlu filament. I've had better luck with it in the past than the California filament, so hopefully it holds up to a few rounds.